So it's now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Nadine Larvier. She is the kind of researcher we need more of. She was a full-time clinician in a psychiatric hospital for over 12 years, and she continues to apply her clinical experience in her current work as a full professor at l'Université de Sherbrooke in Quebec, Canada. She is also a researcher at the University Institute of Primary Care and Social Services at Sherbrooke and at the Mental Health University Institute of Montreal, where she collaborates actively with health services dedicated to persons with borderline personality disorder in the province of Quebec. Dr. Lerivier's research centers the voices of folks with BPD while examining a critical facet of identity, work, and occupational challenges, some of the things that Bria was just discussing. Today, she will talk with us about her innovative work integration intervention and how occupational identity relates to daily life. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Nadine Larrière.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. Okay, sorry. Can I go? You let me know when I can start. I will start again. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Bonjour. I don't know if you can sign that. So it's for hello, everyone. I'm really, really honored to be with you in this wonderful conference today. I am coming from Sherbrooke, as was mentioned. Oops. Wait a second, just a second. Okay, I'm figuring out my buttons. Okay, so for those of you who do not know where Sherbrooke is situated, I'm not that far from you guys. I'm about 6 hours by driving up north. So today you will sometimes hear my accent when I present to you today really a topic dear to my heart. And I agree with Suzanne that it's really closely linked to the testimony we just heard. I will start with a quote that will set the stage for the topic of today, linking our relationship to our occupations and how it reflects aspects of who we are. So this comes from one of our research participants, and here it goes. I was always in pajamas. I took the garbage out in pajamas. I went to the convenience store in pajamas. At some point, my occupational therapist said to me, "What do you think your children see when you're always in your pajamas?" And it really hit me. I repeated this to myself, and the next morning I was dressing myself. And this is before the pandemic, because I know we went through this a bit, many of us, during the pandemic. Before, I thought, I don't work, I'm at home, so I will stay in pajamas, not put on makeup, not comb my hair. I don't do this anymore. I dress like a woman, like a missus, like a mother. I never thought one day I would be like my cousin, going out with my girlfriends, eating at restaurants, a little cup of wine, dressed nicely. I thought she was someone by doing that. Well, now it's me, and I love it. So today I will be blending what we can learn from the literature, including some of the studies we conducted on occupational identity issues of persons with BPD and their impact on daily life functioning and participation. I will share with you a preliminary version of our work reintegration program we call BWE to help persons with BPD who do not have a job at the moment, that we would see them and accompany them in that process. And throughout my talk today, I will share with you useful tools that can stimulate reflection and discussion about occupational identity components that are related to daily life. So a bit about my background that will tell you a bit more why I really invested a lot in that topic. As was mentioned in my introduction, I was a clinician many years, and during that part of my career, spending time with persons with BPD, certainly the focus of my sessions were about daily life struggles, daily life questions, um, questions about meaning in their occupations, mental representations of their occupations. And really, I saw that there was a lot of questions, a lot of struggles, a lot of uncertainties, and they had a lot to share about this aspect of themselves and of their lives. And at the time, uh, there was not a lot of focus on this topic in the whole community of people with BPD and those of us who want to help them and guide them. So that led me, really, that sparked for me the interest in pursuing learning more through research studies involving persons with BPD so that they can give their voice and we can all understand better their occupational needs and their occupational issues. When I talk about occupational identity, what do I refer to? As an occupational therapist embedded in occupational science, we view humans as occupational beings. So that means that when we assess who we are and we think about our occupations, one of the things is that we can assess overall our capacity for doing. In addition, when we think about the way we do activities in our daily life, it can certainly tell us about aspects of ourselves, some personality traits, our mood. In addition, when we think uh, of ourselves, it will trigger, I would say, questions and reflections about our occupational choices. And that includes our interests, it includes our values, what is important to us, it includes goals that we set for ourselves. It includes to what we feel we need to do or prioritize in the immediate present. And I'm certain that if I asked you spontaneously what includes your occupational identity, you would probably tell me about your roles that you are currently doing or the roles that you wish eventually to accomplish or the roles that are difficult for you. When we think about our identity and our occupations, the influence of the environment is absolutely important. We have heard that throughout the day today. Uh, Not only our environment will influence the way we can accomplish activities, but also occupational opportunities because it can vary from society to society. So, in a nutshell, when we think about our relationship with our occupations, it's really that through participation in activities, they offer experiences where we can learn about ourselves, validate ourselves, and it's a link to the social world that will also influence our identity. And so, for us as occupational therapists, for sure, when we invite persons with BPD to introspect about who they are, it certainly includes their relationship with their occupations. And when we look at longitudinal studies that were conducted with persons with BPD, I'm sure many of you know about these studies, but here I will just summarize them again because my main message is we see that daily life as rich opportunities to link back to who we are. And when we look at when persons with BPD receive therapy, are followed over time, they face challenges, particularly in the work domain. So we have seen with the McLean study and the study done by Gunderson over 10 years, symptomatology improves over time for many persons with BPD, but psychosocial functioning remains often impaired. and up to 40% of persons with BPD will function or be on disability pensions. So enabling participation in meaningful occupations is really essential. What we have done, we have wanted to have a bit of a closer look on different aspects related to participation. The first study we did here was with 3 groups of persons with different kind of mental health issues, and I will just focus on those with cluster B personality disorders today. But with the questionnaire that we administered, what we see here is that for those with cluster B personality disorders, the areas of life that were perceived as most difficult to accomplish were leisures, work and school, taking care of your psychological and physical health, and relationships. The areas of life that were perceived as being the least difficult to accomplish were communication, both verbally and in written way or through a computer, and activities of daily living, what we would consider, for example, taking care of your hygiene. The other element that we looked at is satisfaction with different areas of life. And the areas of life that were the least satisfying were relationships, taking care of your health, leisures, and work and school. And what was most satisfying is activities of daily living. And when I presented findings to colleagues of mine, for them, really what they became aware of is really to ask about leisures, because all of them from other disciplines said, I never ask my clients about their leisures. And I see that it's such an area of life that for them is difficult to integrate in their daily life. The other way to look at links between identity and daily life is through the concept of occupational balance, which means, in this case, to look at our satisfaction with our time use. And we did that comparing occupational balance perceptions between women who didn't have any specific mental health issues and women with cluster B and C personality disorders. So in the 2 groups, they were in their early 30s, and most of them in our group were mothers. What we saw as differences between our 2 groups is that our women without mental health issues. Thank you. Okay, so we're back. I will continue to present the findings from that study. So what we did is that we looked at a typical day, and what you can see from this graph is that women with personality disorders, because they worked less, significantly less hours in a paid employment, they significantly spent more time in daily tasks and in what they would consider leisure. Subjectively, though, with the questionnaire that examined the time we spend in 53 activities compared to the time we would like to spend in these same 53 activities, what we see you can focus on the column of women with the personality disorders, is that they significantly feel more imbalanced in their time use in activities that allow them to fulfill different important needs, like taking care of their physical health, like having gratifying relationships, like feeling challenged and competent and engaged, and also being engaged in activities where they can create meaning and a positive identity. So that's another way to look at our links between occupations and identity. And we asked also to tell us some elements of perceptions with regards to their activities. And what we see here in these graphs overall is that women with personality disorders tend to feel significantly less competent in their overall activities that they do in their daily life, that for them they're significantly less important, and that they feel significantly less interested in them. So here is a link how it's not static. It's a dynamic relationship that is influenced by our experiences, by relationships in our life. And here it goes. Again, a quote from one of our research participants. I started when I was very young. My mother asked me to work for the same company as her because they were looking for orderlies. When I was younger, I did not take it seriously. I wasn't really aware of what the residents in the nursing home were going through. I didn't really care how they were living. In the last few years, it's become something that I like to do because my work has always given me a little something to look forward to. I tell myself that if there weren't people like us to take care of them, their life would be really bad. People are very grateful for what we do, and so are the families. It's fun to be told that. It represents something that it's hard to say, but it represents something that I'm useful. It represents that people need me, that somehow I have to be a good person, I have to be patient, and I love what I do. So that brings me to another study that we did, and we wanted to learn more from women with cluster B personality disorders, but men as well with cluster B personality disorders about their mental representations of occupations and links to identity components. So we did that with an exploratory study. And in our sample, overall, they were around 30 years old. Three were employed, four were students, one was a volunteer, one viewed gaming as the main productive activity, eight were single, and two were parents. So here on the slide, I'm not sure if it's that big, but this is one of the questionnaire that we used. And later on, if ever there are some clinicians in our audience or persons with BPD or family members that would be interested in having these questionnaires, I will be happy to share them with you. So this questionnaire asks persons to reflect on different benefits they can gain out of engaging in activities. So for example, the activities that I do, they reflect the kind of person that I am. They contribute to me feeling competent. The activities that I do help others. The activities that I do have the right amount of challenge for me. So that was the first questionnaire that they filled. The second questionnaire that they filled in this study is the meaningful activities, wants, and needs assessment. So again, thinking about the things that I do, are they fun for me? Do they help me feel close to other people? Are they interesting to me? Do they help me to be playful? And then the third step, following completion of these questionnaires, they participated in more in-depth interviews where we asked, how does this activity represent who you are? Why is this activity important for you? What have you learned about yourself when you participate in this activity? So the first theme that I will comment on is that in our sample, the occupations that they chose were had a lot to do with the possibility to affiliate with other people that they felt they had similarities with, regardless if the occupation is socially sanctioned or seen as deviant. And why is that? Well, for them, they said that it helps consolidate the vision that they have of themselves, either a positive vision or a negative vision. They feel that whenever they engage in occupations for that reason, it's a refuge where they feel protected from judgment. It's an opportunity to observe others and make links back to themselves. And whenever there's a helping others component, well, it really triggers altruistic feelings and feelings of usefulness. So a quote to illustrate this element comes from one of our participants who said, a bar, it regroups people that do not have self-confidence, a macho world, narcissistic cheaters. This is who I am. Maybe not narcissistic, but I think more about myself than others or my girlfriend. The other important theme is that at the core of identity is having a productive activity. And why is that? Because it provides concrete experiences to confirm a sense of competence, to also prove social value, and to fulfill really an important need for personal and social recognition. But it confronts to social norms and performance standards, and it really can also activate symptoms and characteristics of BPD. What happens with work is that it tends to be idealized, and we will see in a few minutes a consequence of that. So here we have a quote from a participant who said this about his studies. At least it proves that I understand. I've been told so much that I never understand anything that I think people will see that I understand something. So we will pause for a minute and then continue. Well, a minute, a few seconds. We can go? So that will lead me to go a bit more about the occupation of work. And so to introduce the topic, here are two quotes. I think that if returning to work goes not too bad, I will feel like an active member of the community. For sure, it will give me a certain satisfaction, a certain esteem of myself. I'm an active person and I get a salary and I deserve it. It is very important because I've always said the day that I lose my job, what will I do? Without work, like now, I have no routine, I have nothing to wake up to, no dreams, etc. So it's not a surprise that work is challenging. We've heard the challenges of sustaining more stable types of employment over time. What we have a profile that we can draw from the literature is that persons with BPD, and I don't want to generalize, but there's this trend that there's enthusiasm with regards to looking for a job, going to an interview, and performing well in an interview and during the initial stages of a job. But then the job keeping skills pose more of a problem. And on a daily basis, work will be a source of success and also a source of suffering. Very quickly, it can shift around. So then, what we have seen is that there tends to be for them many times job history with a lot of instability and frequent job changes, with long periods of employment that can lead, as we saw with numbers earlier on, to have disability pensions, which can be okay temporarily, but for many of them, it can be on a more long-term basis, which in the end, work is also such an important occupation that we would like to work around that. So what are our hypotheses to explain this kind of profile that we tend to see? The hypothesis is that personally, work can reactivate unmet needs and or unresolved issues from the family environment, which means that the idealization that sometimes we see in persons with BPD is that they will have unrealistic expectations that the boss, for example, can substitute effectively and heal the wounds. And that can be unconscious, but that can lead for them to have a great need to feel validated and recognized in the workplace. The other element is that the frontiers between the personal self and the professional self can be blurry. This is something we will talk about in our work reintegration program because we have heard from our studies and from our practice with my colleagues is that sometimes work seems like a continuation of therapy or that it's not that clear the relational distance that they should adopt or can adopt or is better to adopt. Some have developed an identity as a psychiatric patient and may wish to have the benefits that can come with it, such as some financial benefits. So it depends of your system in the States compared to ours in Canada, but we are a country with a few social programs that can be attractive for some people. There are some persons with BPD that rebel with the notion of working or even engaging in society because for them it means that they adhere to the capitalist system and it's not congruent with their values. Other hypotheses that we have seen as well is that sometimes the choice of a job is driven impulsively and not that congruent with their real interests, their talents, or their previous experiences. And that will be a big focus of our work reintegration program. It has been documented that they're seen as challenging colleagues, but at the same time that they're recognized for their leadership qualities and their creative qualities. Performance can be a challenge. So some of their personality traits or attitudes whenever they are in action, in tasks at work, well, we can see perfectionism. One tendency that we have seen is over-engagement, intolerance to the unexpected, procrastination, and avoidance. There's also a maladaptive coping strategies related to stress. And so we have documented too that there's high absenteeism, fatigue, and sometimes some want a way to feel better or recover before returning on the labor market. And that, as a consequence, may mean that they're disconnected for a longer period of time out of the labor market. So for these reasons, and because we know and we've seen how work is such an important domain of life, closely linked to many occupational identity issues, and such an occupation that can really help to consolidate identity and nourish identity, we have created a program. We are in the stage of finalizing the validation of the manual, and we called it BWE, for Borderline Intervention for Work Reintegration. So we have developed the manual in collaboration with clinicians, with counselors who work in community organizations, and persons with BPD. The main goals of our program is to help persons with BPD know better who they are as a worker. We hope for them to develop a better self-esteem as a worker and a greater sense of competence. They will spend time in many activities that they would do with us to have a deep understanding of what work means to them, learn a variety of workplace tools and strategies, and have a more diversified routine so that the tendency of over-engagement in work is reduced and they can fulfill a variety of needs through a variety of activities outside of work. And we hope that they will be mobilized actively in a sustainable work reintegration project. So BWE has several components. The first one, a very important component for us, would be to work in partnership. So clinicians who are typically in the public system. We also welcome clinicians from the private system, but our private system is very, very small in Canada and in Quebec. So largely clinicians are within the public system, and work closely together with community organizations who help persons with mental health issues integrate, return to work successfully, job tenure, reintegrate the labor market. So BWE would be administered in collaboration with a community organization where at some points we would have sessions co-led together. The other element is that we will combine group interventions with individual meetings. It's an integrative approach where we take the best out of occupational science, occupational therapy, and psychology. For us, an important element would be practice mindfulness strategies, energy management strategies in each session. And then midway, it would be the participants who would teach others what they have integrated in their life and share with others ways in which maybe they adapted the strategy. So overall, our program is based on principles of adult learning. So to give you an overall view of how we go about talking about occupation and identity elements. So we would start with an individual meeting where each person would set their personal goals, and we would look at the program in detail and look at a contract with the rules to follow and expectations for themselves, for the persons with BPD, and ourselves as the therapists. And then we go into the group work elements. And our first theme is about meaning of work. So as a group, we would discuss this through a collage activity. Then our second meeting is about gaining more self-awareness about myself as a worker through filling questionnaires, and they have homework between sessions where they would also fill questionnaires about personal factors, about occupational factors and environmental factors, so that in the end they would learn more about themselves. And then we would continue on this theme of learning more about who I am as a worker, but in a real life situation. So the group will go in a community setting and spend half a day working there in a volunteer way, but working there. And the goal will be that they self-observe themselves, and us, the therapists, we would be with them and really be observing them as well in order to really collect constructive feedback. And then the session following that would be about strategies, building on maybe what they practiced on the session before and incorporating other strategies as well, such as looking at planning, priority of tasks, management of energy, etc., depending on their needs. Then we're midway in the program, so we would have an individual meeting again and go back into groups, and we would be more in a phase where we would see with them more their relationship issues and skills. Many of these participants will probably have been in therapy, but what we would build on that and focus really on work situations. So with colleagues, with their boss, and it's really them who would provide the scenarios. Then another topic we cover is disclosure of personal information about mental illness at work. So again, through role playing, looking at thinking about when is it appropriate, to whom, at what moment, in what context. And then we would practice again, but through role playing skills in order to feel more comfortable when dealing with insurance companies, the agents that are related to social programs, healthcare professionals, where they have to discuss the delay to go back to work or papers and that kind of thing. And then our session would be on integration of work into a meaningful daily life. That would be our last topic, to again think about activities outside of work and using the questionnaires that I've showed you before as an example. We would do that. And then it's time for review and closure. We are planning to do a booster session online 1 month after we have done BWE. We are hopeful to do it in person in the fall. So our next step is to try it out. We are finishing validation of our manual, and we will try it out in the fall with a group in Montreal. And following that, we will adjust the manual. We want to adapt it for online delivery. We know that online will be with us, even if the pandemic is getting reduced over time, or with the situation is improving. We want to conduct a more formal effectiveness evaluation next year and translate it into English, because right now it will be in French. So to close off, As a way to conclude or to go towards the conclusion, I will show you a few tools that I have used that we incorporate in our studies or clinical practice to again stimulate reflection and discussion about what I've been presenting today. So this is an interview with a rating scale that would be filled by the clinician, but it really targets various elements about daily life and with a focus on thinking about yourself in relation to your occupations. So, for example, does your daily schedule let you do things you need to do or you want to do? What is the biggest challenge you're currently facing? Are you able to do the things that you need to do or that you want to do? There's elements too where we would ask the person when they revisit their past, we would look at it in that way. For example, have you been able to choose the occupations that are important to you in your life? In your physical environment, in the area that you live, are there opportunities for activities and places to go that interest you? Do you have persons in your environment that you can count on? If ever, like, for example, you would like to accomplish meaningful activities for you, how do you handle it when your routine changes? Is also an example of a question here. Another questionnaire that we will be incorporating in our BWE program is self-esteem as a worker. So thinking about yourself at work as a worker, I feel that I'm a person with worth, at least the same as on an equal basis with other workers. As a worker, I'm able to do the things as well as most others. And the last questionnaire is an interest checklist. So it's all small, but thinking about what I like, what I've liked in the past, what I like right now to do in my life, what I would like to do in the future. And this is really interesting afterwards visually to see where are the areas that are most invested or what have been the changes throughout your personal history with regards to your hobbies and interests. So I use that clinically, I use that systematically with all my clients. So for me, I wanted to conclude by going back to my title. So, and to the message how enabling participation in meaningful occupations is really important for all, but for persons with BPD, because we know that our activity patterns are at the heart of the recovery journey. And what we mean by that is our activity patterns will include thinking about the way we engage in activities, the choices that we make, or that we really reflecting on how much do I do comes from my choice versus what I feel is imposed is another element of activity patterns. We also know that balance, occupational balance, is another example of an activity pattern that absolutely influences the recovery journey. And my second message is that really daily life has a richness of occupational opportunities to connect with oneself, to learn about oneself, to validate oneself, to take care of oneself, and also to challenge oneself. So I will conclude with that. I'm good with that. Not bad. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your presentation. Comments and questions have been flying in fast and furious, and it's been so interesting to sort of see what our audience has to ask you. One thing I wanted to offer first is there's just a comment from an audience member saying, I wish that we had occupational programs like this in the United States for people with BPD or for people with mental health concerns in general. And the commenter goes on, in Judaism, we say that the greatest mitzvah or good deed is to give someone a job. And just how necessary your work is. So thank you so much for being here and sharing your work with us. Lots of questions here. One is, as we're speaking about the importance of
Yeah.
work, I'm
Yes.
thinking about balance also. And
Yes.
somebody wrote in about sort of what about the occupational imbalance in regard to the all or nothing traits that may come along with BPD.
Mhm.
So, you want to help people get a job, but not get them so involved in the job that they let go of relationships and leisure. How does
Yeah.
your program work on that?
Well, really, the first step is to reflect on this to begin with tools that can help you have a sense of where you are at in terms of your level of engagement and particularly the variety or not of activities that you have in your daily life. So we would use tools as agendas, for example. The idea is to, first of all, reflect and become aware of your profile with visual tools. And going from there, then you see the consequences of that and make goals to, towards what you would like to change.
Mhm.
Because in the long run, and it's a challenge for many people, it's really the target is to have as much as possible a variety of activities and as much as possible you stay mindful when you do them because many of us, including persons with BPD, can do activities like in a superficial way and not realize that there are benefits that we're not aware of and that we take for granted, like activities that we take for granted or we feel they're useless. But when you are mindful when you do them, well, you can realize that no, it's true. It helps me to concentrate, or it helps me to be more contemplative, or it helps me to connect. And I didn't realize that.
Mhm.
So that's the way we would go about it.
Yeah, and I can really hear that. Oftentimes, family members talk about how they observe their loved one doing better in the context of some structure, which is, I think, a little bit of
We
what.
cannot hear Marie-Paul.
Oh,
Oh, oh dear, I can hear Mary Paul.
I couldn't hear you, Marie-Paul.
okay.
No,
Can you hear me now? Is this fixed?
I cannot hear you.
No? I. Uh,
Oh, I will jump in with a question then. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes,
Okay,
I can
great.
hear you very
Marie-Paul
well.
was just talking about sort of families saying often about their loved ones with BPD, how much people seem to benefit from having a structure, and that
Yeah,
that helps with many, many, many things. It seems like
yeah.
that's part of what your work has been. One question that came in that I wanted to get your take on was how might you support clients and adapt your program for folks who might not resonate with systems of capitalism so they can connect with a sense of meaning and purpose while not sort of being part of a system that they don't appreciate?
Yeah. Well, what we would look at with them is still the idea of what are their goals and life projects, and it could be like fulfilling yourself and using your talents and your skills is what is really important. But I mean, it doesn't need to be through a typical uh, work paid job, but still looking at the consequences of that because you're making financial choices that can put you in a more insecure position. But we would really be open to see how do they see themselves having a meaningful and fulfilling life that doesn't involve a typical, you know, working paid job.
Hmm. Makes a lot of sense.
Mm,
We've got a lot of questions coming in from clinicians. So many people want your guidance here. One
okay.
question was asking, saying, yeah, I find it difficult to get commitment from clients I work with to get involved in activities because there's
Yes.
often a search for the right or the perfect activity or job. And then that's, of course, linked to confusion about identity and self. What
Yeah.
do you recommend for clinicians when trying to help clients find activities that feel meaningful and aligned with values, even when clarity around values is also a challenge?
The other element that we would put forward and we will stimulate as much as we can in BWE is learning in action. So
Mm.
exploring, exploring who you are, exploring the experiences of yourself in real simulations. So that's something that we will have them do once, but we will encourage to, if ever, with the community organization, they do have these volunteer experiences to help them, go back to a future employment, to again use these opportunities to explore all of this and work with them to be more nuanced in the end, because we know that it's again a target with persons with BPD, that they become more nuanced to see that an experience is not all bad or not all good. So to have this more nuanced perspective, because we know, as I showed you briefly with results, is that they do, you're right, tend to idealize work. So we would go with what they've lived in that experience of simulation, and work with their discourse to like bring in nuance. That's how I would answer this at this point.
Wonderful.
I can go on and on, but I will be more short.
I'm going to give it another try. Can you hear me now or no?
No, I cannot hear you, Marie-Paul. I don't know why.
I will keep going with a few more questions then. I noticed that part of your BWE intervention is talking with folks about when to disclose about mental illness in the workplace.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what advice you give people who are making those decisions about disclosure?
Yeah, well, the advice is very personalized and contextualized, because it's a topic that it's not a black or white answer here again. So the way we're going to do the session is really our vision about the topic is really to use the past experiences that our participants will have had disclosing at work. So with whom did they do it? When did they do it? How did it go? And why did it go wrong if it went wrong? And why was it beneficial if it was beneficial? But the angle we want to emphasize is whenever you want to disclose what exactly. And it's usually around needs that you have, so that you will maintain wellness at work and have a more satisfying performance at work. So what kinds of accommodations will meet your needs? So for example, in one of our studies, persons with BPD said they need for them that the expectations are very clear, that the conditions are very clear. And you were talking about structure. That's something that came out too at work. So what do you expect from me? What tasks do I need to do? So that would be one example of the focus might be not necessarily giving that many details on BPD, but saying this is what I need to be like a productive worker, but a happy worker, happy to contribute in the department or your company. So that's how we're going to go about it.
So it's disclosure in a very individualized way, really specific to the situation, and often tied to a need or to a need to sort of self-advocate.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. We have time for just one more question, I think. This one may be from a family member who writes, encouraging my loved one to work is a thorny issue, and I know it's important. How can I bring this topic up, and how can I support them?
Well, it's not easy for sure, trying to convince someone where they're at different levels of motivation or readiness to embrace. I would say it could be sometimes by using like a questionnaire to bring up the topic. Like they found this, and just fill this up, and let's see what are your thoughts about this. and being supportive whenever there's changes in the discourse of the person with regards to their contemplation about, wanting to be more active in going back into this reintegration process. But it's being patient and supportive and really using whatever the person says, and you see, oh, there's a door that opens to make a suggestion or to give ideas. But it's not easy, I would say, and you have to go day by day to see how receptive the person is. Yeah.
I'm getting a theme of being very individualized, very contextualized.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being with us here, Dr. Lariviere. We'll hear from you again at our panel discussion later this afternoon.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
and for
you.
the rest of us, Marie-Paul, you're back.
Yeah, well, I know that you could hear me and the audience could hear me, but for some reason, Dr. Lariviere could not. So thank you, Suzanne, for asking the questions, a lot of the questions that were so important. Maybe I cut you off. Were you going to say something? Or okay.
Oh boy.
We are at time for our mid-afternoon break. So please be sure to be back in 15 minutes. That will be 3:05 Eastern Time for the last section of our conference before the panel. Now, no conference focused on identity would be complete without a discussion, of course, of race and ethnicity. This last section before the panel will be focused on lived experience and anti-racism in DBT. We will see you at 3:05.